you guys all for coming. So again, this is our first sprint that we're going to be running. And basically going to be covering, okay, how do you find your climate niche? What does that mean? How do you find the sort of area within climate? Because that's like an unbelievably broad label that you personally are most excited about. So that's what we're going to be covering today. Before I really do that, I would also love to ask. It's like I already know the answer to why are you guys here. My guess is basically you're either interested in finding a job specifically in climate, energy, sustainability. I could throw out like 7 more of these same buzzwords. There are so many random words we use to describe climate and climate focused jobs and industries. So I assume you're interested in that. You're interested in finding one of those jobs. Or you're not necessarily, but you think that could be kind of cool. You like sustainability and maybe a career in that could be fun. You want to learn more about what that looks like. But the question I want to ask you guys, so feel free to just interrupt me straight. I love this to be conversational or send in the chat. Like, why are you interested in the sustainability, a climate job? What about, a career in one of those industries is exciting, is appealing to you? So I'd love you guys to put that in the chat so I can get a sense of that before we get started. I think for me personally, like I was first interested in it because I don't know, it seems like probably the biggest problem that our generation faces as a whole. And if I'm going to spend, tens of thousands of hours working on something in my career, I want that to be on something that really matters and something that's important. So what better than, the biggest problem that we face as a society seemed like the best option for me. Anyone else want to share why you guys are interested in climate sustainability job? World is on fire. Yep, that's very fair. You are not wrong. Yeah. No, I understand that the frustration of seeing the world around you and everything happening is definitely a strong pull. Yeah, no. I mean, thank you guys for sharing that. I think also one of the things that I underappreciated is that before I worked in climate, it was all I wanted to work on a big problem and important. But one of the things that makes me really want to work on climate and continue working on climate now that I've been doing it for a couple of years is like the people. At pretty much everywhere you go in like in our industry, like you just meet the coolest fucking people on earth, like the most interesting, passionate, like humble, authentic people. Because when you're working in your full-time job as something that like you really, really care about, you're dedicated to, you just bring a different, energy to work, a different authentic personality. And so I think that's just like one of the amazing things. I just loved all my coworkers. They're all very genuine people. They're all very high energy, really, really care about what they're doing. And I think that's just an amazing trait to work in people. So that's the thing that, gets me to keep coming back to working on climate. And it's also why I don't know, it's cool to have events like this because there's so many of us here who are all sort of connected, drawn together by the fact that we share a passion for climate. We share a passion for the same thing. And that's, an easy way to connect with other people and a really, really powerful thing. So it's always like really energizing for me and inspiring to see events like this where there's so many other people. Okay, so now I also want to quickly, before I start, go into College to Climate organization, what our mission is. And it's very simple. It's just we want to provide college students and young people in general with the knowledge and connections, skills to find their own place in climate, basically help people connect their passion and their, really strong interest in making the world a better place, especially in the realm of climate, with their career and make that something they can do as their full-time job and dedicate their life to doing. And that's really all we're doing. And I think realistically, like this comes out of our own backgrounds. Like we started College to Climate after searching for our own, climate jobs and basically hating the process, finding it to be, miserable and really, really challenging. And through that time of, struggling through that process and trying a bunch of different methods to find jobs and seeing some of them be complete wastes of our time and some of them be effective, we learned eventually, okay, what is the best way of doing this? We wanted to, make that easier for other people. I think we also, like at all of our schools, didn't really know many other people interested in climate jobs. And so while a bunch of our friends were, working in consulting, they were going into a bunch of industries that had, fixed recruiting timelines and you could just follow what all of your friends were doing. And there were clubs that told you how to get those jobs. There wasn't really any of that. So we were just, figuring it out on our own. And that was both like a lonely and just a really challenging process, which is what brought us to then, okay, try to make this easier for other people and dedicate a lot of our times doing this. Now, all of us do this in our free time outside of like our full-time jobs working in climate still. All of us work sort of across the realm of industries. We have Jess who works in like climate PR communications. Casey works for a climate VC fund that was a podcast at one point. They're kind of an interesting progression. Caitlin works as an engineer for a sustainable cement company, and I worked in finance for a sustainable jet fuel company. So we kind of work all over the place to completely different things and now dedicate our time to this. I don't know if anyone from our team else from our team is here. If they are, feel free to also introduce yourselves. It'd be amazing. But I don't know if any of us are. I'll take that as a no. Okay, so then quickly, I also want to back up and describe sort of this is the first workshop of a number of them. So I want to describe, okay, what are all of these going to look like? There's going to be sort of one every week, every single Wednesday night at this exact time. So this one we're going to go over, okay, finding your niche, narrowing down your job search, because climate can mean 100 different things. And it's very, very broad. Into the things that like the niches that you specifically are interested in and give you some frameworks for how to think through that process. Then sort of next Wednesday, we're going to go through how to apply and interview for these jobs. So how do you actually then, once you know what you're interested in, how do you make yourself stand out in these applications? In climate in general, they're very, very competitive jobs. And so you do have to do sort of go above and beyond to make yourself stand out in your application interviews. So we're going to give you sort of the tricks and tips that we have found along the way to make that easier, to make yourself stand out. And then we're going to go into like the hidden job market the week after, which is basically that I think the stat I learned the other day, I think it was Lila actually told me, was that 80% of jobs are never posted anywhere online. And that's like obviously crazy and kind of shocking. And I think a lot of us sort of have realized that's the truth, but don't actually know, okay, how do you actually access these hidden job market, as we call it? What does it actually mean? So we're going to go through how to do that and give you some like effective tips, tricks, templates, things to go to actually go about accessing those jobs. Then we're going to go through, okay, a lot of that hidden job market revolves around networking, meeting people. And so we're going to go through, okay, what does that actually look like? How can you network authentically? What's the best way to build relationships, to do a networking call, to try to get on a networking call with people, to follow up and sort of maintain and build those relationships over time. And then hopefully by the end of that, we'll go through our virtual career fair to basically help you guys connect directly with employers and get to like meet some of them face to face, learn about some really, really cool companies that we'll have coming. I'll record all of these. If you're not able to make it, don't worry. I will send out recordings after. Yeah. And then also today, very simple. So I'm just going to start with sort of an overview of the whole job search process. This is our first thing. I want to sort of dive into all of that and give you guys sort of our high level insights into the job search process. What are the ways, the things that you can to be most effective for that, and go into sort of, okay, since climate is so unbelievably broad, what are some of the sectors within climate? Break that down a little bit so you know, okay, what are the different even options for my niche? What could that even possibly be? What are some of the things within that are possibilities? And then we're going to go through our Ikigai workshop, which I'll leave as a surprise. And then hopefully by the end, you'll leave with, a strong sense of what your niche could be, or some options about potential niches that you can then explore within. You dive a little bit deeper and do exploration on your own to figure out, okay, what exactly should be the niche that I'm going to be focusing on. All right, I know that was a lot. Any questions, random things, interrupt me, yell in the chat. I got you. Are you sure? Okay, sweet. Okay, so first, job search overview. So the first thing I want to say, and I'm sure many of you guys have already learned this in your own job searches, but it sucks. It's horrible, and I want to recognize that up front. I want you to know that you're not alone in experiencing that. The fact that the job search process is really, really hard. It takes up a lot of time and it's frustrating. It's worth all of that time, because finding a career that you're really, really excited about, passionate about, and love doing is like the most fulfilling thing on earth. And you're going to spend thousands and thousands of hours in your career. So it's worth dedicating the time to make sure you're maximizing that, getting the best out of it. But it can be really, really hard and time consuming. So that's just part of the reality of it. I think one of the things I want to talk about first is part of the reason that is, and I think it's just because it is in general so different from what we're used to in school, right? In school, we're in the environment where you're getting sort of constant feedback, right? In terms of grades, in terms of on like problem sets, on homework assignments, on exams, on everything. You're getting like sort of constant feedback and validation in what you're doing. That's sort of easy as a fuel for motivation. Like you have that, okay, you don't do an assignment, you get, oh, my grade went down. So that's something that's really easy to motivate yourself to do it. Whereas in a job search, obviously, you're not going to be getting really that feedback at all. Maybe you'll get like a rejection email every now and then, but most of the time, you're not going to hear anything, which can be really challenging to use that as a motivation source. Same lines, like in school, you have a sort of a peer group you're doing it with, people who are going through the exact same classes, exact same exams, assignments, to be around all the time. That's easy to sort of motivate yourself, because you have almost this like social pressure, the social like feedback loop around you, which again, the job search is the opposite. It's very, very isolated. And then with that, again, school has like sort of continuous outcomes. There's like milestones. You'd be getting like 84 in a class, and you're, okay, I want to get this up to like 87, 88, so I can get my B plus or whatever. There's, easy sort of milestone goals that you can use to motivate yourself. Whereas in the job search along the way, it's either you haven't had a job or an internship lined up yet, or you have, right? It's very much discrete outcomes, 0 to 1. So it can be very demotivating when, you've been spending a month doing it. And since you don't have a job, it's easy to think you have made no progress. And so because of that, and all of these things in general, I think it's very different from the way you're going to find motivation for school. And people, and me myself especially, find it really difficult in the job search to have that motivation because of all these things and how these things sort of manifest, and our motivation manifests very different from school. So recognize that there's times where you're not going to feel motivated to do your job search along the way. And that's okay. It's very normal. And you just sort of have to dig deep and go into yourself to do it. Now I want to talk through a couple of frameworks I think are helpful for doing that, for actually being able to self-motivate. I think the first one is basically that it should really evaluate yourself and analyze how you're doing based on your inputs, the effort you're putting in, as opposed to the output. Since you are not going to be having these like milestone goals or feedback along the way, judging by outputs like you almost would in school can be really, really difficult because you're not going to be getting a lot of feedback there. And so the alternative is you really have to be, analyzing yourself, being proud of yourself, patting yourself on the back for the effort you're putting in, based on the inputs, based on, how many jobs you're applying to, how many cold emails you're sending, how much time you're spending on your job search. And that can be, you're right, to pat yourself on the back and recognize the good work you're doing to motivate yourself. Or it could be the opposite. That could also be being like, oh, okay, last week I didn't spend enough time. I wasn't prioritizing my job search like I should. And so I think it's important to be evaluating yourself and sort of pushing yourself based on your inputs, not your outputs, because you're not going to be able to find much motivation for your outputs. For me personally, the framework that I think has been by far the most helpful for thinking about this is the concept of luck surface area. I don't know if any of you have heard this before, but basically what it means is that like luck isn't really a product of, isn't just a product of okay, everyone has the same probability of getting lucky and some people do or some people don't, right? And there's not like you have a certain chance of luck happening in your life. And pretty much in all aspects, luck comes as a product of like the actions you take. You can do things that will give yourselves a lot more chance to be lucky, and that's can give you a higher luck surface area. And if you spend a lot of time choosing actions that increase your luck surface area, eventually you're going to get lucky. You're going to have a lot more chance of getting lucky. In the job search, you can think about this as like two people. One person applies to 10 jobs. They're interested in finance. And so they just look up climate finance on LinkedIn jobs and apply to the first 10. Don't really write cover letters, but just apply to those 10 jobs. And then there's someone else who applies to 30 jobs by digging down deep rabbit holes and finding cool companies that they're excited about. Maybe not the easiest jobs to find, which in fact gives you a much better chance at finding them because they're not going to be the easiest jobs found by everyone. And that person also sends 30 cold emails to random people and goes to 5 events where they could happen to meet someone who could potentially hire them. And that person, as you know, I can obviously tell, has a much broader luck surface area. So I like thinking about this framework when I'm choosing like, how should I be spending my time? And I don't want to be motivating myself. So the job search, not feeling motivated. Think about, okay, I could be improving my luck surface area myself to find that opportunity to end up getting very lucky to find a job. I don't mean this to say that like it's really that difficult and you need luck. It's going to be a product of luck and you don't have a good chance to get these jobs. That's not at all what I mean. What I mean is, since you're trying to maximize these probability events, it takes a ton of different actions to eventually give yourself the luck surface area to find a job. I think that's just for me been a very helpful framework in thinking about it. And then basically, I think I have one more thing here, which is basically, I want to also frame the like time commitment that job searching takes. Like it will take a massive amount of time, but in comparison to the amount of time that you're going to be spending actually doing these jobs, whether in a summer internship or in a full-time job, this chart I just put together that puts it in the amount of time you spend in percentage of the waking hours you spend in a year, all the time you're going to spend awake doing anything in a year. And I want to do this mostly to emphasize like how much time you're going to spend in a summer internship or in a full-time job, which would be, drastically more than the 9% of your year. Because you're going to be spending so much time there, it's 100% worth it ahead of time to spend a lot of time in your job search to maximize that opportunity to do something you really, really enjoy, you really love, and you're going to learn a lot from. So it feels weird to do a ton of effort in the job search ahead of time. It feels abstract. It feels like you're not getting a ton of value. But you obviously are, and so it's 100% going to pay off. So it will take a lot of time, but it's worth it. Then basically I want to talk through, okay, the job search overview and think of it almost like a funnel, right? There's like 3 main steps to any job search. First, you have to like find the jobs you're interested in. Then you have to actually submit an application, send all of that. That narrows it down even more, and the company will choose, I don't know, 10, 15 people from that to actually interview. They'll go through phases of interview until they'll end up hiring 1 or 4 people, whatever it is for that role. And in these process, I think the most underappreciated part is that finding roles when you do it right is by far the most challenging, time consuming, and by far the most important part. All of the others sort of can become an exercise that it takes some time to prepare each time, but it's really not the difficult part. There's not a lot of uncertainty to it. And finding roles and finding the right roles and finding a lot of the right roles is by far the hardest part, especially once you get into the hidden job market. And you're not necessarily finding roles that are just publicly posted on a job board. You're finding roles that aren't, or you're even creating a role yourself. So that's the last thing I want to emphasize. And the last thing, oh, never mind. I don't have any other thing. Any questions about this job search overview? Anything I've talked about there? Any things that are unclear before I dive into the different niches and break down what climate possibly means? Nothing? Okay, sweet. Feel free in chat, interrupt me at any point if anything's confusing. This is obviously like your guys' time. We're doing this to try to help you. So interrupt me is strongly encouraged if you have something. I'm glad that's reassuring. Yeah, it definitely was for me. It felt weird, and that's the time that feels like, oh, I'm not sending an application, so it's not productive. But it's really that's the opposite of the truth. Okay, so then niches of climate. First thing is that for wanting to work in climate or anything isn't really like an industry. It doesn't actually narrow down your niche at all, right? Like it's not an industry. It's not like a sector. In fact, it's just like a mission. It's sort of the product outcomes of what you want to work on. It's like the second order effect. You're like, I want to work on a company that does this, but that narrows down like the impact of it doesn't actually, it still covers a massively, massively broad range. And so one of the most difficult and most important parts is narrowing that down, focusing on a smaller subset. If you think about sort of the luck surface area analogy, it had the image of fishing for a reason. Like that fishing, I really like that analogy. If you cast like a massively broad net, like I want to work any job related in climate, it's going to be a lot tougher because you're not focusing on a concentrated area. Whereas if you get a really specific net that's perfectly sized for fish in a certain area and put it down exactly where those fish are going to be most likely, you're a lot more likely to actually end up catching a bunch of fish you want. Right. And so because of that, like it's important to narrow down your focus area. So then all of your actions going forward are a lot more effective. So that's why we start there. And with that, here's sort of our framework for thinking about how you break down a job and working in climate into the different things, all the different possibilities. And you can really break it down into like 3 different main categories that you can sort of narrow down within each of them. So the first one being organization type. Do you want to work at a massive company, work at a startup, a venture-backed startup, someone like developing new technology that they want to share with the world, a nonprofit group, working in academia, or even for the government, right? And all of these are very, very different experiences across any of these. Yeah, Kefir, what's up? You have a question?
Yeah, hey Corey, I had a quick question. So you mentioned the Lux service areas, the thing you want to maximize, right? So it's like kind of like diversifying your efforts, if that makes sense. Like, so the net should be as big as possible. Is that right? Because you mentioned before that the net should be smaller so you can be more specialized.
Right. I mean, so you want to like basically, I don't know. I would think about it as you want to like throw as many nets as possible, do as many actions that could give you a chance of being lucky as possible. And ideally, the more concentrated all of those actions are on similar things, the more those different things like benefit each other, right? Like if you throw a net one place 7 times, the 8th time you throw that net, it's a lot easier. So example, like if you're applying to 7 companies and every time you do that, you send them like a 1-page or 2-page market research PDF on their industry to show how much you care because no one else is going above and beyond and sending them that. Like the fact that you chose to do that in your free time shows that you care about that job more than pretty much everyone else, right? It's an indication of that. If you concentrate on one specific industry, you can send that same report to 7 different companies, right? And so you can spend a lot less time doing that thing to go above and beyond. So if you concentrate on a niche, it's a lot easier to do that. Same in like a job interview. You're going to be asked similar questions. You're going to have to like know similar knowledge about the industry to show you care, show why you like know about that industry specifically. And if you have a narrow niche, it's a lot easier to do that. You're duplicating your effort. You're not having to do that like research before an interview every single time. Does that make sense?
A little bit. Can you expand on what it means to have a big net? I understand like having a lot of small, very focused nets, but what does it mean to maximize surface area in that sense?
I really just like giving yourself doing a bunch of different actions that give yourself a probability of getting lucky, a probability of
Got you.
like, oh, I want to hire this person.
Okay.
Go to like 7 events. One of those events, you might randomly meet someone who, oh, I actually know someone hiring for a role exactly like that. If you sat on the couch that day, like obviously you had zero like probability of that luck happening. So it's really just about random chances to get lucky. The net thing could be confusing.
Okay. Got it. So like a diversification of portfolio kind of. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
Yeah. It's not, yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily about, doesn't have to be like a bunch of different things. You can be doing the same action that could get you lucky 100 times. And that's going to also be really helpful. Okay. So I already talked to you like organization type and like, you guys probably know some of the differences, but generally like if you're working for like a larger corporation, the benefits are generally that um, you have a lot more job security, if I'm honest, right? Like compared to a startup, the company's a lot less likely to go bankrupt or completely fail, right? So you have a lot of more safety there. There's likely you're going to be doing a more specific task because they have a lot more people. So your task is going to be less generalist and more specialized in one area of expertise. Whereas a startup is sort of the opposite. You're generally going to, it's going to be a little bit more risky, but you're also higher upside because you're going to often get equity in that company. You're going to generally play a slightly more generalist role because there's just a startup. There's only, maybe 25 people. There's not someone for each tiny little niche. You're going to need to do some of this, some of that, and you get to try a bunch of different things. That can be a negative or a positive. It depends. And working for the government is like always a massive bureaucracy. So it can be like frustrating, difficult to get some things done. But until recently, really high job security. And you're going to be working with other people who like care about public service. So there's a lot of different benefits, different organization types. I'm happy to talk through this with anyone. But this is like one of the things you narrow down by. The next is like role. Okay, what are you actually going to be doing on a day-to-day basis for the company? And this is both the product of what you like doing and the things, the skills you have, the things you're good at. And then lastly is vertical. So like which area within climate, there's like 100 different ways for us decarbonizing or improving our climate or minimizing the negative effects. And so there's 100 different ones. You should try to narrow down into some of those things that are interesting. When you do this, I think one of the things that's important is you're not going to know the answers to what you actually want for any of these three. You might know it for two, you might know it for one. And with that, like it's okay to like narrow down by maybe like organization type and role, and then leave vertical a little bit open and try to figure out what you like. And maybe apply to like 7 different verticals that you think are cool, but have only one role type that you want. So it's good to like narrow down as much as you can, but you don't have to necessarily narrow down in all three. You can, I care a ton about organization type, but I don't care as much about role. So I'm more flexible with that. That's totally okay and normal. Any questions? Lastly, on like these 7 verticals, it's basically here's a broad range of how this breaks down. And this is really just focused more, this framework focused more on all the different ways that we produce a bunch of emissions, right? And then we have to decarbonize each of those. So energy, it's easy. We have to create more renewable, low carbon energy sources to free up the grid. Agriculture, there's so much emissions that come from that, whether it's in our food system, whether it's in the agriculture or the fertilizer production, transportation, the way that we can, either adding, electrifying everything and making that with cleaner electricity, or that could be generating low carbon fuels. It could be limiting how much we travel through clever ways like micromobility or public transport. There's so many different things with all of that. And so these are just interesting. It's cool to like dive deep into some of these fields and see which ones are most exciting to you. These are a good way to sort of narrow down like, oh, I love industrial stuff. Like I will say a lot of things are also intersections of a bunch of these. Like I worked for a sustainable jet fuel company that turned carbon dioxide into jet fuel. And so for us, like that was a carbon utilization company here under carbon. So we're using CO2 as our input material. It was for producing jet fuel, which is like a massive industrial plant that produces jet fuel. And so it's an industrial thing, and obviously it's a transportation thing because it's decarbonizing aviation as the end use. Right. So like a lot of these companies are going to touch a bunch of these different boxes, but it's useful to see, okay, which ones of these are most interesting to me? Do I care the most about, are just like fun for you, whatever it is. This is just, I want to emphasize like the role types that are in climate is literally everything. Like it's every possible role is a climate focused role. There's no job title that isn't, which is a reassuring thing. And you can find sort of whatever skill set it is. There's some company that's focused on decarbonization that needs pretty much every skill set on earth. Okay, so then I want to quickly walk through a case study. So like for me, what I realized first, and before I even really wanted to work in climate, I'd worked for a couple of startups and I loved that. I love the environment. You have to do a bunch of random shit. They gave me like a bunch of experience of things that I was not remotely qualified for because the startup, they're kind of a shit show. It's just the vibe and they need to get things done. So they'll give you random things to try to do because no one else has time to do it. So you get a lot of really, really cool experience. And I loved that. I thought the fast pace was amazing. I knew that was for me. So I narrowed down first based on that. Then like, I don't really know what it is, but for me, some reason I love big tangible things. So I loved industrial stuff, people trying to build, lower carbon intensity factories to produce everything we use on earth, whether it's cement, chemicals, jet fuel, whatever it is. I just, for some reason, could not tell you why. I think that stuff is really sick and cool. And so I narrowed it down by that. for role, I actually didn't really know what I liked doing. So I was more open on this. I was like, anything that I have some skill set that could be useful for is worth it as long as it's a startup working in these fields for me. So that was how I approached it originally. Now, mostly just to highlight how different it is. That was when I was working in startup finance. I now have like completely changed my mind. And I want to do that mostly to emphasize like how dynamic this is. I still know for a fact I want to work for a startup, but I've actually learned I do kind of care what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. And finance for me wasn't that interesting. I got kind of bored of it. And so I have to now, okay, I actually do care about my role. And the things that I'm more interested in is starting a company because I love that process, or actually working as an engineer on the technical side. And then the vertical I also still care about, and it's pretty similar interest as it was before, but now I care about my role more. So this is sort of my own process of working through this. Now, if you don't know actually where to start, how do you figure it out within any of these, within, you know, company type, within the niche, the vertical that they're working in, whether it's energy or, you know, industrials or transportation, agriculture? How do you actually figure it out? Is there's really three ways that I found. It's either you can read and see what stuff jumps out at you is most interesting, piques your curiosity. You can talk to people, or honestly, the best way, the most effective way by far is by just actually going out and trying it, right? Like that's a lot of what internships are for, is to go out and try a bunch of new things. And both early jobs, like especially in your first couple of jobs in your career, like you're exploring, you're really just figuring out and testing your hypothesis of like, here's the niche I think I might like. And then you do it and you're like, oh, actually, I didn't like that. And it guides you in the future to choose, okay, what do I actually, you keep updating this over and over again. So you're not going to have a like really confident sense of what this is going to be, but you'll figure it out along the way. And otherwise, reading and talking to people are good sort of shortcuts to do it. The best framework that personally I found for thinking about this is, I love the quote of like, pay attention to what you pay attention to, right? Like the things that naturally capture your attention, pique your curiosity, the things that you like you give a second look are naturally the things that you would be passionate about. Like that sort of spark and thing that you actually just pay attention to it, I've noticed is a good predictor of the things that you're going to long-term develop a passion for. And so paying attention to that as you're reading, as you're talking to people, the things that really catch your eye, the things that you're like, oh, interesting, the things you choose to like ask follow-up questions about are often good guides as to things that you as a person are most passionate about. Here's just a list of helpful resources. I will throw a list, a more extensive list later in chat for all of you, but here's just some of the good ones that you can go through to help. Good sources for reading, good sources for finding jobs, good sources for Open Door Climate's a great resource. For example, basically it's just a list of people who have offers that they're willing to like chat with people who want to work in climate, to like share their own experience. You can learn about their job, learn from their experience, and see what's interesting to you. So that's a great resource where you can go and talk to a bunch of people, find people who are likely to respond to you, reaching out, asking to learn about their stuff so you can get a better sense of your own career. Okay, any questions about this before we go to Ikigai workshop? I would say, yeah, it's a good question. So I would say you're not really necessarily narrowing your potential for jobs, right? Because the reason that like you're going to be effective at getting a jobs is because you have a specific, yeah, I will share the presentation after. You have a specific focus. And when you have specific focus, you're just more effective at finding those jobs. Like you don't get a job by having a really massive, you apply to 100 different industries, you're not more likely to get a job than if you apply to like 50 jobs in one niche industry. You're way more likely in that outcome. So I don't think like, I know it feels weird that like you're narrowing your focus area, but you're not necessarily narrowing what you would consider. You're just narrowing what you're actually focusing on. And by doing that, you give yourself a lot better chance. You make everything you're doing a lot more effective. And yeah, I will send this out in an email to everyone as well after. Anything else? No? Yeah, I would say there's really not a set timeline. Consulting ones, it's a little bit closer to like traditional consulting timelines in that they're really far in advance, but it really depends. That's only with like the massive consulting firms that have a sustainability consulting arm. There's a lot of consulting firms that are like 8-people companies that also, like many startups or many younger companies, nonprofits, tend to hire 1 to 2 months in advance. It's not like these industries that have sort of established intake timelines where they hire really far in advance and have sort of a cycle with it. It's kind of the opposite. They just need someone to do something, then they post a job and hire someone, and they do that generally 1 to 2 months in advance. It's one of the things that can be quite frustrating about working in working climate as opposed to other industries, is unlike your friends who might have like jobs they can apply for like 9 months in advance, you might not even have many roles you can apply for until a couple months in advance. So yeah, that can be like kind of unfortunate, but it's just sort of the reality. Yeah, narrowing down a specific company is even more effective. Like if you do a bunch of proactive outreach to try to talk to one company specifically, you have a much better chance, right? Because they will notice you. They were 100% likely to notice you. And if they're hiring for something that you're relevant in, like they know as you as the most excited person about that company, and that's going to really, really make you stand out. Evaluating whether the startup will stick around. I will answer that later. That's a really tough question that I could give a very long answer to, but is a really, really good question. The best answer is, have they raised money publicly recently? And if they haven't, ask them about it directly. Like, how long do you have money for? Just ask them in interviews. They will tell you the answer. Okay, Ikigai. First of all, what is Ikigai? Does anyone know? Sorry, you didn't see that. Does anyone know what Ikigai is, out of curiosity? Has anyone heard of this concept before? Read the famous book? Have some guesses? Oh, wow. Okay. You might have cheated. You might have seen it, but I trust you. Yeah, so Ikigai is an amazing concept. First of all, this book is absolutely fantastic. But basically, yeah, what it means is exactly like you said. It's like your reason for being. It's your purpose. But it gives you sort of a framework for how you can come up with thinking about your purpose. Obviously, if someone just asks you what your purpose is, like this is a very abstract, introspective concept that is really, really challenging, right? But like Ikigai creates a good framework for thinking about it. And what they does is they describe it sort of as the intersection, the overlap between what you love, what you're really, really good at, and then most importantly, what the world needs / will pay you for, right? Like this thing, especially when you think about it as a career, like it's important to find the intersection of something that's like a really needed, important skill set that's going to have a positive effect, and someone will pay you and will sustain yourself to do that you really, really enjoy and you're good at, right? That's like sort of the ideal, the dream thing that you could be focusing your career on. And we've adapted this basically similarly to climate. It's basically the exact same things. It's an intersection of things that bring you joy, things you're good at, and the work that is necessary. So it's gonna be, I know it's really difficult, especially when you're in school. Like it's very rare that you're ever gonna like have a moment to really take a step back and actually think about this kind of stuff. And so what we like to do here is, since you guys decided to show up tonight, we're gonna basically spend the time now. We're gonna give you guys 15 minutes, 12 minutes, 12 minutes to basically just think about this right now, to break it down. And then I've done this exercise. We've run this like workshop, I don't know, 20, 30 times now. And every single time I go through it myself, and I feel like every time or most times I've come up with some new interesting things that I hadn't thought about. And just like taking the time to step back and think about it, what brings me joy, and think about what are the first things that come into your head when you're thinking about that. You get some interesting insights out of it. So we're going to basically go through and do this exercise now. I was going to share you mine, but I don't think we really have time, so we'll just go straight into it. But when you do it, basically think about what brings you joy, what you're good at, and what work needs doing separately. So break down those three things before you even think about the overlap. And just, it can be work related, it can be school related, it can be absolutely not. You can be like, I love exploring things and being on hikes and traveling or playing sport, whatever it is. Like it doesn't have to be work related to still give you helpful insights. So just go through each of these separately. And then at the end, spend a little bit of time, okay, what could be some interesting overlap between them? And then we're going to go in groups and share each other's with each other. Sometimes we can come up with clever insights about other people's from thinking about maybe overlaps that they might not even thought about based on things that they're interested in. So let me share a template for you guys. Now, what I also say is feel free to do this on pen and paper as well, or I will send right now. Oh, that's big. I will send a quick Google Doc that has a like empty template that you guys can use. So here's a template. Since this is a shared one, basically, if you guys are gonna use a template instead of just doing it pen and paper, I assume you guys might ought to do this, but if not, basically just go here. When you open it, press file on the top left, make a copy, entire presentation, put your copy wherever you want it, and then you can enter it into that. So we're gonna spend like 12 minutes doing this. So at 8:49 or so, I will call you guys back, but just spend the time right now going through this exercise, thinking through these three things. I will try to play some random background music, and I will let y'all know when we're good in like, yeah, 12 minutes. So enjoy, take your time and enjoy the introspection. I apologize for forcing you to do it. All right, everyone. Now I'm going to throw all of y'all into breakout rooms with a small number of you basically to present. and share. I know I apologize for making you brag about the stuff that you're good at to other people, but it's good for you to do that. So I want you guys to share through what you sort of came through in each of the three boxes and what you found as some potential things that could be a good overlap for one of those, for all three of those things. And then also I want you guys sort of to help each other, give them other feedback on, okay, what could be some other possible intersections, some other possible overlaps between those three things. I think other people are often really good at finding things that we might not have thought so ourselves as overlaps, that just because they weren't, fit the stereotype of things that we'd always thought we wanted to do. Like, oh wait, maybe that actually could be a good overlap. So I will do that now. Full advice for each other and learn some cool things. I will end this in a couple minutes, so apologies for keeping you like a minute or two older, but thank you guys all for actually staying throughout it. I appreciate it. Let me share my screen again quickly. So again, now that you guys have gone through it, I hope there was some like useful parts of the introspection and the like getting to like take a step to actually reflect on this stuff. And then again, if you have the time later, try to like tie it back to like this sort of framework we have around both like, okay, based on what you came through the things you enjoy, the things you're passionate about, things you're good at, like think about, okay, which organization types, which roles, which verticals are most exciting to me? Which of these things you're really confident, like I really know I want to work for a nonprofit, or I really know I want to work as like as a business development or a specific process engineer, whatever that is. Like think about those things you're really confident in, and then focus your energy on, okay, how can I narrow down the other two to get to even more specific niche? Yeah. With that, also next week we have another similar one of these workshops next Wednesday. That is just, we'll cover the stuff I already sort of mentioned a little bit, but let me send you guys a link for those of you who haven't signed up and want to. I'll send out a link. If there's any questions about this Ikigai, everything you've done, I also am hosting in office hours. I do this a couple of times every week on Friday from 5 to 6 p.m. So I'm happy to like talk through your Ikigai, try to give you my own tips or talk through anything else we've talked about here. So I'm happy to do that if any of you guys are interested. And then I also sent the link to our career fair I'm hosting in a month. Would love to have more people sign up as quickly as possible, so then I can brag to companies to get more companies to come to hire y'all, because there's so many of y'all coming. So yeah, that's why. And then I'll hand it over to Jess. Also, I think it's after all this, I think we have another cool program we're running that you guys might be interested in, and also could help us in partnering with your universities and bringing this to more people at y'all's schools. If I can figure out how to move the slide.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Corey, for all you're doing to create these opportunities. It's super exciting. We are super excited as well to tell you about the Career Lab, which, guys, if you've been waiting, this is the revamped official announcement launch pad or post launchpad era. So we're combining everything that we used to pack into these 4 weeks of the launchpad, which you're similarly going through with Corey throughout these sprints. We're packing it into a shorter, more condensed program where you can spend more time with us, more time with other peers, working through a lot of the same topics and challenges that you might be experiencing on March 1st. So it is a totally virtual program, and you can participate in a number of different ways. The first way that you can participate is by bringing this opportunity to your university and having them sponsor your seat. So we basically will handle all of the communication and coordination between you and the university, or sorry, the university and us, to help enable you to participate. All we need is that intro, so you expressing interest to your career center. I will leave my LinkedIn just in the chat, and then we can also include our team email. If you guys are interested in making a connection to your career center program, that's great, and we'll help to see if we can create opportunities for you to participate. Or you can also participate just on your own, independent of your university, and that is accessible through the student page on our website. It is a paid program. It's $30 per our Launchpad program. But as always, we're super excited to help accommodate you if you need any support. If that $30 is in any way a burden, we still want to make sure that you're able to participate. So just reach out to us if that is a concern. Yeah, we're again super excited about this. It's already a privilege to be going through these sprints with Corey, but it's just another touch point, and you'll leave with a bunch of resources. And yeah, so we're super excited about that. If anybody has any questions, just let us know.
Yeah, we'd love to get as many people as possible from all y'all schools. So hopefully there's like broader communities at your own school of other people you can go through the fun, mostly terrible job search process with along the way. But other than that, like, thank you guys all for coming. I think this is everything I had, but I will hang out after if anyone has any questions or things that we can do to help you or talk through, like I will be here right now after. You can hit me up in our community on Slack. If you're not there, you can find a link on our website. But yeah, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your nights. Hopefully I'll see y'all next Wednesday. And always, again, I'll be right here. If you guys need a resource, feel free to email me, Slack me in our community, any of the above. And have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Corey and Jessica. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Hello.